I'm Sue Garman. I'm glad to be back with you again. Last month we talked about half-square triangles, how to make them using traditional method and how to make them using paper foundations. Today we're going to be talking about color. What you see behind me is the Stars for a New Day quilt. It's done with very scrappy set of fabrics. But what if, instead of using scrappy fabrics, you went with a monochromatic color scheme? Here's the same quilt, the center of it at least, done only in reds and whites. When you're choosing colors for your quilt, I've always told my students that I spend 50% of my time choosing the fabrics. If you don't get those right, your quilt may not look right. Here's a block that was made using monochromatic color scheme, all greens. That works. Use a good variety of greens in there, or whatever color you choose. This one uses two colors that are adjacent to each other on the color wheel. Let me pull the color wheel up for a minute. Here's a color wheel. You've got your primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, which form a triangle. They're the triad of colors. But what if we took the blue and took one of the colors next to it? So here I've got a little bit of blue-green. You can take any two colors and put them together into a quilt, and it really adds a little bit of zip to your block. Here's another block using those primary colors, using the triangle scheme, red, blue, and yellow. But what if you shifted and used purple, orange, and green? You see what you get? You get some real drama when you use those triads, but tilt it on that color wheel and you'll end up with a really different set. Here's another set of blocks. These are two blocks that are identical. Look how different they look, simply because of the color choices that were made across the block. So in here I've got green versus rust. These are just swapped. So you see, color choice, the value, that is how dark, how light they are, makes a big difference in how your block looks. I like to take fabrics and audition them, that is, cut them out, lay them down, see how they look. Sometimes you have to stand back from them to see how they look when they're put together. One of the things that I like to do when thinking about color selections is to take a focus fabric and use all of the colors that are in it. In this case, I've used a focus fabric in the borders of this and just made some half-square triangles to put in here to show how to choose fabrics. So here's a focus fabric that's got reds and blues and greens and golds and tans, and I've taken all of those colors in lights, mediums, and darks and placed them across here. When you're thinking about making a quilt, you don't have to have things that match entirely. Choose the lights, the mediums, and the dark ranges of all the colors that are in your focus fabric. Let's take a look at another one. In this case, we've got browns, rusts, and greens. And look what we've got here. We've got some dark greens, medium greens, light greens. We've got some light rusts. We've got some dark ones thrown in the middle of the other colors. So think about taking the dark, medium, and lights out of the focus fabric that you're using. I want you to take a look at this fabric. When I first saw this fabric in the store, I thought it was pretty darn ugly. It's got a teal, which is not my favorite color. It's mixed with burgundy and pink, and those don't really go together. And I challenged myself to do what I told the students to do. Pull the darks, mediums, and lights out of that focus fabric and put them together into your quilt. Look what happens. I've taken those dark, mediums, and lights, the teal, I've got the light turquoises, the dark ones, the medium ones, and put them together in here. I've got this burgundy in the darks, the lights, the mediums, and I've got the tans also in here in lights and mediums. So you see what a difference it makes? In fact, when I was finished putting this together as a sample, I liked it so much, I went back to get more of that ugly fabric. Obviously somebody else had the same idea, it was gone. Here's another example. When you're using fabrics that have a theme to them, for example, African prints or florals or holiday prints, you don't have to have only those fabrics in the quilt. This has got a holiday print around the border as my focus fabric, but I didn't use just holiday prints when I selected these. This is a red. It's not a holiday print, but it works. This is a green. It's not a holiday print, but it works. I do have some holiday prints. Here's poinsettias and candy canes, ribbon. So you see, if you take and use just the colors, not necessarily the theme, you get the same effect, but I think it ends up being better. The next quiltlet I want to show you has to do with using value. In this case, I've taken a lot of different lavenders or purples and put them together, but they're all in the light medium range. And look what happens. It's a great quilt if that's the look you're looking for, but sometimes you want something a little different. Here's the same purples, but this time they're all dark. It gives you an entirely different look. Think about what you want out of the quilt. In this case, I took light, medium, and dark. It's got a lot more pop to it. That may not be what you want, but if it is, use the full range of value in there. That is the dark, mediums, and lights. Now, in this next set of fabrics, I'm using a border that is not the focus fabric. I want you to look at the fabrics themselves. Okay, here's a set of just scrappy colors thrown all together. But what happens if I take and throw in some of those rich colors? Here's the same fabrics, but look what happens when I change out and put in a really bingo green, a nice gold. Here's another gold. You see, just changing out a couple of those colors and throwing in some rich ones makes a big difference in the finished quilt. In this next quilt, what I want to talk about is using your background fabrics to advantage in the quilt. Okay, look down at the quilt. In this quilt, first thing is the focus fabric is repeated here in the darks, mediums, and lights of the pinks and yellows and blues and greens. The background fabric is the same fabric throughout. It's the same tan print. What happens if you change that out and use a bunch of different prints? Do you see how different it looks? Think about in your scrappy quilts making the background scrappy also. I think it makes your eye dance across the face of a quilt. I've got one more example. Here's a quilt where the same fabric was used in the background throughout. But one of the things that we tend to do is we tend to use prints in all of our quilts. Plain prints. What if you threw in some geometrics? Same quilt, but I've changed out the backgrounds to add a checkerboard, a stripe. Here's another checkerboard and stripe. And in the colored parts of the quilt, I've got plaids, which are also geometrics. Here's another one. Here's a checkerboard. So you see what a difference it makes when you throw in some geometric prints. Next month, we're going to be talking about sawtooth stars and precision piecing. See you then.